Welcome back to a new episode of Podcast on the Brink, getting back into the regular swing of things. 2 straight weeks with an episode. This week's guest, the coach, Brian Tonsoni of Assembly Call and Delphi Bracketology. Coach, it's been a while since you've been on the show, but wanted to have you on this week to get some thoughts on the new regime, scheduling. Maybe we'll talk some potential lineups and different things you expect to see out of the Hoosiers this season. Welcome back to Podcast on the Brink. Always good to see you. I understand you've been playing some golf this offseason. How's that been going?
It's getting better, which is I have a long way to go. So getting better doesn't mean that I'm good at it. I do enjoy. We have a teacher group that gets together at least once or twice a week, and then sometimes I get out in the morning and go play around by myself. It's a way that I can challenge now that I'm not coaching anymore. Try to keep that competitive nature, but I have a long way to go with that, Alex. But it's always good to be on your show. I love talking basketball. I really appreciate what you do to bring information to us as reporters, podcasters, whatever I'm called, and fans alike. So it's always good to talk Indiana basketball. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to you guys getting back into the swing of things with Assembly Call. Missed hearing you guys this offseason. So hopefully as we get into the fall here and getting closer to some basketball being played, we'll get back to some more regular Assembly Call content. I know you guys have a strong following, and I'm sure that some of your fans as well are going to be excited to get you guys back on the air more regularly.
Yeah, we're excited too. We have decided to cut back the everyday Thursday night shows, but we've done a few shows throughout the summer, and then once August comes, I think you're going to see us regularly. Obviously, every post-game show will be there as well.
Good deal. So I just wanted to start off, it's obviously, I think I looked back and, you haven't been on the show since, I think, late December maybe last year, early January. So a lot has transpired since then. Just your early impressions so far of Darren DeVries and what he's been able to accomplish here. Obviously, had to totally rebuild the roster in Bloomington, somewhat out of necessity. I'm not sure exactly how that process went down with all the transfers and whether there was guys he actually wanted to keep, but ultimately I think a clean start was probably best for everyone involved. But now that I say the dust has settled on the roster, they do, I guess, have one spot technically open. Who knows if they'll fill that? Not speculating, just thinking out loud here. They have 12 guys. They've got that trip coming up next month to Puerto Rico. They've got the schedule set. Just what are your overall, high-level thoughts on what has transpired here the last couple months and as we get ready for these games coming up next month in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, I'm excited for the change. I think change was needed for Indiana basketball to try to get back to where Indiana basketball should be in many of our eyes. Will Coach DeVries be that guy? We hope so, right? We do not know until the games start being played. But almost everything that a new coach has to do, I think, has been positive. One, building the roster, as you mentioned. Yes, it's a total turnaround, but in today's world, that's a lot easier than if you had to do it with freshmen or, JUCO transfers as he did when he was at Drake before the open transfer portal. I thought he got some very interesting players in there that fit a prototype for what a DeVries player is, with size, shooting, athleticism, that I think has been different than what Indiana has had in the past really 8 years over 2 coaching regimes. The emphasis on shooting is exciting for many of us because that's a modern basketball. I think you're going to see a little bit more of that. I think the schedule was well done. I think part of that is the trip, being able to take the trip. He did that at West Virginia. I think that helped get West Virginia off to a good start in his only year at West Virginia. I think that was a good decision to make. And I think as we talk schedule, I thought it's strong enough to build a resume for bracketology, and it gets you ready for a tough Big Ten conference. So I thought that was good. And then I just appreciate his work. When he signed Wilkerson and flew down there the day that Wilkerson made the decision, that's then a little different than some coaches in college basketball, and it was a little different than the approach that Coach Woodson did. And now he's starting. I don't follow recruiting as much anymore because it's just so widespread, but it seems like we're getting top talent to at least come to visit and top talent that's interested, and then he is constantly working the recruiting angle. And it just seems like he's a hard worker, which I think Indiana and Indiana fans really want from their head coach. So all signs for me since the change show a positive direction. Now, I may be having rose-colored glasses and wanting something so bad after 20-some years of struggle that I'm overhyping it a little bit. But I think when you have a pattern of really good decision-making in many different areas, you have to be pleased with what we see so far, and then the results will really determine that when the games start in November.
Yeah, I told you this a little bit earlier before we started the show. I had a chance. I'm not exactly sure the date. I had a chance in later in June to go up and talk to Darren DeVries in his office for 35 or so minutes, and I obviously have covered Indiana basketball since 2007, and obviously my role as somebody of the media is always in favor of more access and getting more information, because that's how we communicate with our audience. That's how I can come on the podcast and be more informed when I talk to guests and talk about the team, when I write about the team. It's always good to have the perspective of a coach, and I appreciated the fact that he was willing to sit down and talk. But more than anything else, one of my big takeaways from that conversation was just how relaxed, open, honest he seemed in terms of everything he was discussing. It didn't seem guarded in terms of anything, in terms of information. I asked questions and he answered them, and had a smile on his face, and it was maybe a little bit different than kind of the interactions that some of the media had with the last two coaches. So I was really encouraged just from a media perspective. I think fans can expect when Darren DeVries gives a press conference and talks, not saying there's obviously going to be with any coach times where maybe they're annoyed or don't like a question or had a rough practice and maybe aren't as detailed and in-depth as you like. But I appreciated the fact that he was just willing to talk basketball. I think that's one of the big things that maybe we've been missing in terms of getting information in the past couple of regimes, is just being able to ask a basketball question and get a basketball answer. And having a coach that's willing to talk ball, I think, is going to really resonate with Indiana fans. So I was encouraged from that perspective. I'm not sure if you want to weigh in anything from that perspective, Coach, but it wasn't really a question, but just an observation of something I experienced and wanted to share it with the audience.
I couldn't agree more with the fact of talking basketball is an important part of the program, because through media like yourself and us, if we understand stuff, and no coach, as a former high school coach, I didn't like the reporters coming in after a loss or when, but you understand that's part of your job to communicate what you want out of your program. And some coaches do it really well and some coaches really struggle. And so it's good to hear that he is open to that. And comfortable in his own skin, in his own way of communicating, because I don't think we've seen that in the last couple of years. We had it early with Crean. He struggled with that even down towards the end, and then Archie and Coach Woodson seemed to have a little adverse reaction to the media. But part of what I do with Bracketology is I get to now go to games. Our name has been accepted. Purdue and Indiana, Notre Dame, Butler all allow us to go and cover games. And you see a wide array, actually, of coaches and how they talk basketball. And most of them do talk basketball, even though that might not be the most ideal thing that they want to do post-game. They understand that it's a message. And it was one of the things that in the last 8 years really bothered me, is that wasn't coming from Indiana University. You weren't getting some basketball conversation, and while trying to understand the coach role of it as well. So I'm glad to hear that went well.
For sure. That's one of the things obviously Indiana fans aren't too keen on hearing kind words for Purdue basketball and Matt Painter, but that's kind of the one thing I always appreciate listening to a Matt Painter press conference is he'll take any question, whether he likes it or not, he may not give you the best answer, but when you do ask a good question, I feel like there's always a really good answer and a lot of substance behind it. So I've always appreciated that about him. And there's probably other coaches, but without the Big Ten, I mean, Tom Izzo, I think a lot of times too will give you a good answer. Again, may not like the question. I think that's kind of the give and take that you always have as a media member talking to these coaches. Wanted to ask you about this roster. I feel like in many ways Tucker DeVries has been a little bit forgotten as we talk about this team. Everyone's talking about Reed Bailey, Lamar Wilkerson, Tate Conaway, some of these new guys. But I saw a list earlier this week that I think was the top 100 list of college basketball players entering the season. He was, I think, in the top 25. So that kind of tells you where he's thought about nationally, but maybe a little bit forgotten because it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to come with his dad, and he was injured last season. But he kind of epitomizes what you mentioned earlier with the shooting piece. I had a chance to watch him a couple times last season when they were playing down in the Battle for Atlantis before he got hurt, and he was taking threes from not just from right behind the 3-point line, beyond NBA range, making them. He had a great game against Arizona down there. He's a guy that I think a lot of fans should be excited for. Just your thoughts on Tucker and what he can potentially bring to this team next year with his size and his versatility from beyond the arc.
Well, we'll talk a lot about shooting, and with Tucker, it is shooting, the ability to shoot and have range, right? That is something that, Indiana has had some, but it's been stationary shooting in the corners, playing off double teams in the past 8 years. And now you're going to see a variety of ways to get Tucker open, and he understands the game, right? If you watch some of that West Virginia film, if two guys fly out at him, he understands to drop that off with a little bounce pass or find the next guy. So shooting is going to be number one, and I think people who watch Indiana basketball are going to see shots taken from a variety of places once he crosses half court, and I think that's just, again, that's that modern basketball. And yes, I think he has been forgotten. When people look and they say, well, there's a bunch of mid-major transfers that come into this roster, so we're going to have them 9th, 10th, 11th or something in the Big Ten. But, basketball is played at all levels at great skill. And you get a best player from a mid-major. But this is a guy who played at Drake very well, and then he went to West Virginia and played well for 8 games. So I think he's a top 10, top 15 type guy in college basketball, but because of all of what you said with the injury, he's not being discussed. But he will be someone who will be number one on the scouting report. And so then you can play off that with the other players too. Like, you have to guard Tucker and the actions that are going to be run for Tucker, which then opens up a whole lot of things for other players who are also as talented. But the number one thing is going to be range and shooting.
Who else, maybe, as you've kind of combed through this roster, and I know you got some notes and maybe some things you want to discuss, who else maybe caught your eye in terms of maybe just a player that you think is going to be pivotal to the success next year? Anyone maybe flying under the radar? I'm just kind of curious on your overall thoughts. One guy that, and I'm not sure if you want to talk about him at all, but and I think maybe flying a little bit under the radar just in terms of impact, that I wrote a story about and talked to DeVries about, is Connor Enright. And he isn't a guy that really jumps off the stat sheet. He's not going to jump off when you look at him, but you look at his assist rate last year, what he was able to do. He may not even start. I don't think most people were expecting him to start, but he, when listening to what DeVries had to say about him, is a guy that really understands the system and is a blue collar type of player, is going to do the little things that it takes to win. So he's one guy that has kind of stood out in my mind as a player to watch this coming season. Who for you are those guys, and who have you maybe studied in the offseason?
Well, let's talk point guards while you bring up Enright. I think Enright's that guy that everyone loves if he's on your team, but you can't stand if he's on the other team, because he's diving, he's taking charges, he's pestering and then he makes plays that you look at him like, how do you make that play, that assist to DeVries or whatever else? He's a ball player. And you need that in point guard, but you need multiple point guards. I think Indiana struggled in the past because they've had one, and then when you have an injury or you have something happen, now you're moving down to a wing to be a point. Trey Galloway handled the basketball, and he handled it well, but he's not a prototypical point guard. Well, Indiana has 3 point guards, in my opinion. They got Conaway, Enright, and possibly the Drake kid who can play off the ball as well. And the number one thing for me is going to be ball pressure, right? So we'll talk Reed Bailey and the inability for rim protection, the concern that everyone has that is legit. Part of your answer there is putting extreme amount of pressure on the ball. And you have two guys in Connerway and Enright who are just going to be ball hawks. And if, let's say, those two get the 40 minutes, you don't lapse defensively. Whether you start Enright or start Connerway, like you can put pressure on the ball for 40 minutes. And I imagine Drake is the same way because, as I mentioned earlier, the prototype player is long, lanky, that can guard the basketball. And I think you have some of those that I broke them up into point guard, wings, power forwards, and fives. And it's really positionless basketball these days. But I love the point guards for their defensive pressure. As well as what they can do offensively. I think both of them can get in the lane. Both of them can handle the pick and roll. Connerway, not a great three-point shooter, but can score at the rim, and he can distribute the basketball. And I think those are keys to then get DeVries, Wilkerson, the quality shooters looks if you can do that offensively. But I am so excited, Alex, about the ball pressure that I believe you're going to see from Connerway and Enright, and really what that means when you don't have the super rim protection, how important that will be.
How concerned are you about the maybe lack of rim protection when you look at the roster? You obviously have Reed Bailey, who's not a shot blocker. You have Sam Alexis, who played some center, I guess, at Florida. Before that, he was at Chattanooga. He's been. You look at his Ken Palm profile; he's listed as a center, but he's not your prototypical Big Ten center that we've seen. So you look at some of these other Big Ten rosters, like a Michigan, for example. They've got some absolute size up front and skill, and you wonder how Indiana is going to match up against them. But also, they're going to have to match up on the other end, guarding Indiana. So. But the rim protection piece, how important is that? Can that be overcome with, as you mentioned, the ball pressure? And are there just going to be nights where inevitably Indiana is going to be outmanned in the post and they're just going to have to figure out other ways to win?
One, I think it's the weakness of this roster right now is you don't have rim protection. But we as fans and as coaches sometimes get caught up in the optimal lineup. We have with this roster, we have great point guard play. We have great shooters and great wings. And sometimes in a roster, you just have to have a weak area because if you don't, then you should be a top 5 team. And hopefully that's where Coach will get as he's recruiting a couple top 7-foot centers that I see are interested in come and visit. So he doesn't want to play this way all the time, but in his first year in building a roster, he has to. So here's how you overcome it. You put that ball pressure on. You'll see a lot of double teams. I call them monsters, so forgive me if I revert back to my coaching lingo, but you can send people from different places. You can send them baseline for a double. You can post-to-post double. You can double off of what we used to call dork doubling, the worst player. You double off the dork in the offense. And what I like is Coach DeVries has admitted that we're going to be overmatched at times. We're going to have to guard it in multiple ways. And this is where I think Coach DeVries, with the college background, understands how to try to attack defensively the good offenses and the good coaches in the Big Ten. He's going to have a scouting report and a plan. It's not going to be – and again, I want to focus on the positive of going forward as compared backwards, but I think it's a better position to have Coach DeVries trying to make up for the lack of rim protection. And then the other way is you're better offensively. They got to match up with a 5 who's going to dribble at someone and throw a backdoor cut or pick and pop for 3, although Bailey's not a super stretch 4 or a dead 3. So you have an advantage on the other end if a rim protector has to guard out on the perimeter. So ball pressure. And then the best thing that DeVries has said for me is like, we just got to rebound the basketball. If we can rebound the basketball, so you tell Alexis and you tell Bailey, keep the best offensive rebounders off the glass. They may not even have to rebound. So when you look at rebound stats next year, if Bailey and Alexis aren't getting a lot of boards, but your DeVries and Wilkerson and Dorn and Miles, those are guys that are going to clean up. That might be how you protect the rim by limiting second shots. And then the last thing, Alex, is it's a rim and 3 game. And a lot of teams, when they played Trace Jackson Davis and our post players, would allow us to have 30-point plays in the post and beat us because you take away the 3. So if they're going to score at the rim on a post play, you fight like heck. But okay, we'll trade 3s for 2s all day long and win the math problem, right? So I'd rather guard the three and have ball pressure and not have rim protection than have rim protection and not be able to guard the three. So I think those are ways that you fight that deficiency in the roster.
Yeah, one thing that he talked about with us when I met with him, I didn't write anything about this, but asked him kind of about long twos because that's been kind of a thing that Indiana fans and quite frankly I've kind of criticized the last couple of years of Indiana basketball is just the volume of long twos. And he didn't say necessarily that he's totally against it. He more talked about situations when those shots are being taken. Is it a late shot clock situation where a guy's got to go take that shot? Fine with that. Is the right guy taking the shot? Because you look back at Jalen Hood-Schifino, that performance he had the year at Purdue. He was taking a ton of long twos. He was making them, so it was a good shot, right? You want to have the right guy taking the shot. So I think for the most part, Indiana is going to be a team that takes a lot of threes. They're going to try to get to the rim, but they're still going to take some long twos. But I think you're going to see a better organization in terms of who's taking those shots and the situations they're taking those shots. Obviously, if that's what the defense is giving you, if you're getting played out of drop coverage out of a ball screen and the shot's wide open, I mean, if it's a guy that can make it, take the shot. But
absolutely,
I don't think you're going to see a lot of situations where the ball's passed twice and there's 17 seconds on the shot clock and a guy's jacking up an 18-foot shot. I don't think that's going to happen. So that was one interesting thing, that he talked about from a style play perspective. Just going back to one thing you mentioned there, I was also pretty encouraged by the fact that, he talked about turnovers and rebounding as kind of the big, most important things. And, as some people maybe don't, I get into Ken Palm way too much, the four factors. And I just look at those and I look at the teams that win the most games. And, they're obviously doing all those things well, getting to the line, limiting turnovers, shooting percentage with a little, emphasis on the 3-point shot and rebounding are all, important. And for him to talk about the importance of defensive rebounding in particular really kind of made me feel like they're going to be a team that's, send the guard rebounding is going to have to be a big deal because you've got Bailey down there. He's going to be able to maybe fend off a guy or two here and there. He's going to be oversized. The guards are really going to have to get down there. And that's where I like the makeup of the roster in terms of the wings. They got some guys who are in that 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" range that are going to be out there. I think that really helps you having longer guys, more athletic guys in the wing that can go down there and in possessions with defensive rebounding. That was really encouraging to me as well.
Yeah, it's a big thing. Like you finish a defensive possession by getting the basketball, and it is obviously it's very important. Everyone talks about it, but do you emphasize it? And do you emphasize ways of doing it? I believe you just keep the best offensive rebounder off the board. So in a scouting report, if it's the center, Bailey, just block him out. Block him out, maintain your block out. As you said, guard rebounding. And I think guard rebounding is a stat that we should look at next year. But you have Dorn, Miles, DeVries, Wilkerson, all in the 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" range at the wings. And I think your point guards need to go too. And then you can facilitate a break with good wing guard defensive rebounding because you can just turn and go. You don't have to have an outlet necessarily. You can break out and go. And I know Indiana early said they want to shoot in 12 seconds and get out and go. Well, send 5 guys to the glass, go get it, and then let's get out. But that's going to be another way that you offset maybe if you have a post player who's scoring on you, trying different things. But if they got to score first shot. Have a high percentage on first shot. If they don't, and you're a good defensive rebounding team, then you're going to be in a position to win basketball games.
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing that's really underrated in terms of just defensive rebounding is just the fundamental of it, right? I mean, finding a guy and actually hitting somebody with a body. I mean, I grew up obviously watching a lot of Big Ten basketball, and I remember those. Maybe we've gotten away from it a little bit, but some of those Tom Izzo teams in the late 90s, early 2000s, it wasn't that they had the most athletic guys. It wasn't that they had the biggest guys, but they were just monsters out there in terms of finding somebody and hitting them. You see those old videos of the drill where they just put the kind of the thing over the basket where the ball can't go in and they got the pads out and they're just like going out there full combat like football, but it is a lot about, technique and how you approach the middle aspect of it. How bad do you want the ball? How bad do you want to find a guy and block them out? It's important, those things. And not to obviously dwell on the past or anything, but I think some of those smaller details maybe weren't emphasized as much, and you just kind of want to, maybe you don't have as much talent, but if the talent understands kind of the technique and the understanding of like what's important to helping us win, and I think those are two great things to start with: taking care of the ball and rebounding. You can win a lot of games just by doing those things consistently.
You get what you emphasize. The key word you mentioned there is emphasize, and the great coaches have a way of emphasizing and getting that emphasis to be part of the culture, part of the play of each one of their teams. So it's the drills, as you mentioned. It is just the attitude, is all the coaches together on the same page every day, and then do the guys accept the fact that, yeah, I can't just sit and watch a long rebound. I got to go, or I got to keep my guy from getting it. It just has to be a part of what you do. And for DeVries to mention that early, that rebounding is going to be a key in several different ways that he's mentioned that, especially with the lack of size, I think is going to be a key component for next year.
In terms of the scheduling, I obviously saw the schedule. They got 4 high major opponents with Kansas State, Louisville, Kentucky, Marquette. Those are 4 pretty strong games, but haven't really dug in as much into the bye games. I wrote kind of a brief overview of who they're playing, but not really a lot of, I don't want to say meat on the bone, but not a lot of strong opponents in those. Obviously, they need to win those games, but from a bracketology perspective, do you think the mix of games is okay in terms of what they were able to do based on the fact that they have 20 Big Ten games, going to have a ton of opportunities there? I did see some social media comments from a couple folks just kind of questioning having that many quote unquote bye games on the schedule. But to me, it seemed like for year one of a coach that's trying to establish his program, trying to obviously make the NCAA tournament, it seemed like a decent mix of games. Maybe strength of schedule in the non-conference isn't going to be, top 100, top 150, but they are playing some strong games there. Obviously, going on the road to play Kentucky, a couple neutral site games, and then having Kansas State at home. But overall thoughts on the schedule and maybe those bye games. Is there any reason to worry that there may not be enough there to really help the overall strength of schedule?
No, I think from a bracketology standpoint, this is a good schedule. I think this is a good schedule no matter if you're first year, second year, or third year. Is it a great schedule? Okay. No, but sometimes schools schedule great and then run into trouble. Michigan State a few years ago overscheduled, right? And had so many games. But I think it's a good schedule for a first-year team. And the fact that I tend to like to have 5 or 6 power teams on a schedule. I think that's important. Sometimes you get that when you go to Maui or you go to your things and then you add 2 or 3 other games, and that's how you get to 5 or 6. But to schedule 4 individual games, I think is solid. I think the bye games, there are 4 that I consider right now just to be must-win games that aren't really going to help your resume. And then depending on how they play, these are programs in the past that have been in the tournament that are the mid-majors that can be good and finish like 250 or better or 280 or better last year in the Ken Palm. Those in the 200s don't really hurt you, right? And that's Milwaukee.
Who are the ones? Sorry, go ahead. Who are the ones that are actually maybe games that'll be worth watching or could help them potentially?
Yeah, definitely Milwaukee. The Horizon League plays really good basketball. That's a game where you should win 10-15. You could find yourself in a dogfight. I've covered the Horizon semifinals the last 2 years for Delphi Bracketology. Got a second row seat, and I'll tell you what, they can play some basketball. They're just a notch below the top power schools at every level. But I think Milwaukee is a game and a program that is a good mid-major. Incarnate Word has moved upwards, and they finished like 250 something in Ken Palm. So I don't know what they have coming back and the rosters. Those are the top 2 bye games that we're getting. Siena in the past has been good from out east. They were down a little bit last year, but those are the 3 that You want those to be in the 250 to 300 range and beat them. That'll help you as a bracketology. And then your Alabama A&Ms, your Bethune-Cookman, Lindenwood, and Chicago State, those are film games. Those are get-right games. And you need those no matter what kind of roster you have, but you really need those when you have a roster that is 11 new guys and a coach in the new. You can't schedule 11 power schools. If you look back at 20, 30 years ago, we were having a lot of those, but I think it's a good schedule. It's a lot better than what happened last year. It gives Indiana an opportunity to win a couple of games against power schools, and then you go into your 20-game Big Ten schedule. I think it is good. And from a fan's perspective, I think it's fantastic. Kentucky, Louisville, Marquette here in the Midwest under a coach that I think is one of the best coaches in the country. Kansas State coming to Assembly Hall is not local, but I think that gives the fans a chance to go into Assembly Hall and see good quality opponents. So I'm okay with it. I think it's just a good one, not a great one, but it's not detrimental to the success of this team, which is number one, and then obviously with the bracketology and the tournament stuff.
One thing I've talked about in the past is just on some of these bye games, trying to win the game by a little bit more than Indiana has historically. Is there any that I guess that's something I've conjured up in my mind that's important. Is there actually any data that supports that being important? Is it when they play Alabama A&M, if they win by 8 as opposed to 30, is there actually any long-standing impact of that, or is that maybe something that we've just kind of taken as a talking point that maybe isn't as important as we once thought?
It's important because it's when you play Alabama A&M, it's a chance to get your offensive efficiency up and your defensive efficiency numbers better, and then that spread helps you in the net. So you don't want to beat Alabama A&M by 5 or 6. If you do, you want to offset it by big wins. Like, big wins will mean more than smaller victories against teams you should dominate. So if you have a couple of games where you only win 8 to 10 points, but you go and you beat Louisville, Marquette, and Kansas State, you're 3-1 in that stretch. That margin of victory is maybe a seed line or two, maybe, depending on the clump of teams that would be around. Where you get in trouble is where you don't have those wins and you play closer games than the schedule. Now your resume falls to a little bit lower level when it comes to comparing to teams on the bubble. But yeah, you want to win by decent margins, those bye games. The Milwaukee, Incarnate Word, Siena, if they're middle games, if you will, you want to win those by 10 to 15, keep it in that margin, if not more. But that just represents good offense and good defense, which you need to build up that mathematical formula. As far as data to show historically, if you lose 2 games or play 2 games under your expected victory, I don't have that. But it's all part of, you want to build a good mathematical resume too with your offense and defensive numbers, and padding that against some of the weaker ones helps. But it also, Alex, strength of schedule matters too. You're playing Kentucky, Louisville, Marquette, Kansas State. That's good. Some of these people can pad. Butler, Big East has been heavily criticized this year. Butler, I'm trying to figure who else has really weak non-conference schedules right now. Well, they'll pad that mathematical formula, but they won't have those big games. I know Butler was criticized. I'm trying to think who else. It wasn't Marquette or St. John's. But there were a couple teams that really caught it on social media because of the bracketology piece. Yeah, you're going to win games and you're going to have that mathematical formula, but you're not going to have a good strength of schedule, and you're not going to have quad 1 or quad 2 wins, or losses even are better than that. So, yeah, this schedule is pretty good, I think. And I think it shows, again, that direction, as I talked about earlier, that Coach DeVries is going in all areas of basketball. I think it's a good step in going in the right direction.
You guys get obviously super in depth on all things bracketology, especially like late in the process when you're combing through those resumes, trying to pick the teams for the last couple of spots. How often does that come up with your discussions with students of like what a non-conference schedule was for a team? Like, are you comparing that, or is it just simply you're looking at who they beat versus, are you more likely to give the benefit of the doubt of a team that really challenged themselves in the non-conference and played a tougher schedule and maybe took some losses, versus a team that may be padded with some empty calories and kind of just scheduled wins. I'm kind of curious, like how often that comes up when you're having those discussions, and maybe when you're talking about the last 2 or 3 teams to make it in the field.
One, it depends on what the committee will emphasize each year. But when we got started in 2015, 2016, non-conference strength of schedule was huge. And then that's been debated whether it should be total strength of schedule with these mega conferences and the 20-game conferences, whether that should be more in consideration. Why is just your non-conference? Well, you control your non-conference. And I think the committee is right in saying you played teams that were tough. You went 1-3, but you played them, as opposed to you played 10 bye games and only one game against someone else. I kind of like that as a fan and a bracketologist. But to answer your question, we talk about it a lot. If it comes down, we look at trends, and trends are trends until they're no longer trends. But the last teams in, if you have a 300 or worse non-conference strength of schedule, you're really you better have something to offset that. Rutgers a few years ago had that, but they had 4 or 5 top wins. So, but yes, we talk about non-conference strength of schedule a lot at Delphi Bracketology. I think the committee looks at it as well, and maybe more of a tiebreaker situation between a seed line or something. You saw even at the top, Alex, some of the Big 12 teams kind of skimmed or rigged the playing field by playing teams they could beat big margins and build up their net. And they could have been maybe a 2 seed and end up getting a 3 or a 4 seed. So I think you see some adjustment at the top level too if you don't have a strong non-conference schedule. So I think it is a lot more important than people think, and that's where the 4 games that Indiana has, I think, puts them in a good position come committee time to be talked about in that area.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me, like some of these programs, I'm sure they have people just sitting around trying to like study the net from the past couple of years and figure out ways to game the system. You mentioned the thing with the Big 12. Is there anything else you've kind of noticed with that over the time since you've been doing this with in terms of programs trying to figure out maybe efficiencies and different things to try to boost their overall computer numbers? And is there anything do you think the committee, you mentioned with the Big 12 last year, what some of these teams did, and maybe the committee saw through that based on kind of what you're saying a little bit by going down a seed line or 2? Do you think there's a good like checks and balances in between these people these programs maybe that are trying to game the system and the committee actually being able to kind of decipher what's real and what's not when they look at these teams?
I do. The Mountain West a few years ago, all of us bracketologists missed on the Mountain West because they had a lot of quad 1 wins and quad 2 wins, but they all came in conference. And what we missed was that in that particular year, no one really played a good non-conference schedule, and it drove up their nets. And then when they played each other, they got a lot of wins. Well, the committee recognized that, and they were all 8, 9, 10 seeds, and we had some of them in 6 seeds, 7 seeds based on quad 1 and comparison. So I am one of the bracketologists that I think the committee does a great job. I really do. And I know on Selection Sunday, everyone screams and yells at who was left out and who wasn't. I think, every year I'll probably have 2 or 3 decisions that I would question a little bit. But almost every time I question one, I go back and look at the resume, I'm like, I didn't see that. And they have thousands of more pages of information than I do, and I think we do a good job, and Andy does a good job as well with the 2 of us at Bracketology, but we don't have all of the information, and I think it's just same with college football catching a lot of grief. Those guys do a great job with a lot of information. So yes, they're aware of those teams that play 10 games and win by 30, and so their net is higher. I think they do take that into consideration. And there's some new formulas now with Torvik and everything else being considered in the room that can counterbalance one metric being higher than the other. They are more than aware of those differences, and I think that's what makes the tournament so special.
Yeah, I was real happy last year when they brought in Torvik's rankings. I agree with you. I think they do a thankless job, right? Because someone's
Right.
always going to be upset. Someone's always going to be screwed when the bracket came out. Someone's always going to complain and say there was, a conference commissioner that was on this thing and they got their team in, like last year with North Carolina. The whole conversation about that. But again, it's an impossible job. You're never going to put out a perfect bracket. So you just do the best you can. But I also think the more we can bring in smart people that have made these computer formulas and bring those into the equation to give them more information to make an informed decision. I would never want to see it go the way of let's let a computer pick the complete bracket,
Right.
because I think that takes some of the fun out of it. So I think it's a good mix. Again, also if you're one of those teams that's on the bubble, who do you have to blame but yourself? Just win more games and we wouldn't be having this conversation. That's kind of my argument every year.
Exactly.
There will be things that kind of irk me too when I see the bracket come out and everything. But again, there's 68 teams. This is kind of the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, because this seems like inevitable at this point. I'm hoping not, but maybe it is. This whole idea of expansion. Where do you come down on that? I mean, we do have now. We are adding more teams every year to Division One. There's I think 365 teams now, so a lot more than when I guess we started out with 64. Now we went to 68. I mean, do you have a problem with 72, 76? Is there a point where you say, all right, that's too many? We're watering down the product, but I'm not in favor of expansion, but I do think if they had a couple more teams, it's not the end of the world either.
I'm an old soul, so I don't like a lot of changes in things that I'm really passionate about. So I'm against expansion, but I also see the benefits. I would be for expansion if you allowed some non-power 5, power 6, how many power conferences in college basketball you want to count now. Some opportunity for some smaller schools, but with the money situation, it's likely if you add teams, it's going to go to your power 4, power 5, because of the money factor. Is it really going to? And then even, it's just harder now with the formula of no one schedules Indiana State anymore, or some of those teams. But if you could guarantee Indiana State a couple years ago, not this year, but the year they went to the NIT final, a team like that getting into the tournament. I would really be for expansion. We, in that year, I did put on our Delphi Bracketology website, and it's still there if anyone wants to go dig it out, a 70, I think it was 72 or 76 team bracket based on what the committee had. And there's some interesting matchups. And what I proposed was, if you do that, then you the benefit of that on the back end, if you condense like 15 and 16 seeds into more play-in games, you have more winners that are small. I mean, I look at the first 4 in Dayton, and those first 2 games between Alabama, A&M, and someone else, someone wins, they're excited, right? They get a chance to win. Well, you actually give more of those small schools a chance to win if you play on a Tuesday. They get to go to the NCAA tournament. Yes, it's a quick turnaround, but they get to win, and then they get to advance. And then all, at the 12 seed line, it would be all the at-larges that would be playing. But play them at iconic venues, right? Play them at Dayton. Play them at Hinkle. Now Palestra in the East, right? When you have, and then you have a TV amount of games, 12 on that Tuesday and Wednesday night, or 6, whatever you would break it up. It'd be 6 games, I think, each night. That's going to benefit. So I don't want that, and don't think that really, I don't want to see a 15th SEC team out of 16 in the tournament. I do think that there are some ways that they can still hold on to, what is, I think is just really awesome about the NCAA tournament if they want to add some teams. I think 76 would be the max number, though, that I would. And I'm going to love it no matter what. It's what we do, Alex, right? I'm not going to give up college basketball if they come out and say 72 or 76. I didn't give up college football, Major League Baseball. I didn't necessarily like all those playoff expansions, and I still am passionate, have 4 TVs down here in the man cave. So we'll still love the sport. Would love to see it at 68. But I do think there's some ways that you can really keep the magic. Pauley Pavilion, if you want a venue out west, or the Pit, some iconic venues. Incorporate things like that if you're going to expand the tournament.
Yeah, the one thing I would really like to see happen, regardless of whether there's expansion or no expansion, is get rid of the 16 seeds that won their league and earned a spot in the actual bracket. Get rid of having them play in the first four. I think you should take more of the. For one, I think it'd be better TV because I think more people are going to watch. I mean, nothing against these smaller schools, but usually when the first four games come on, I'll tune in maybe to the end of that 16 versus 16 game and then watch the power conference teams
Right.
play later. I'd rather see those teams. If you won your league, you should be in the bracket. You shouldn't have to play into the bracket. So I don't know if that'll ever change, but I do think that that's one tweak that I would like to see.
Yeah, and there's many ways to look at it. It's just a good thing. The amount of money that has influenced college athletics in the last 5 or 6 years, and some of it's good, paying athletes and all of that, but just money with these television contracts and everything. I get it; it drives things, but let's keep the nature of what we love with the game of basketball, which is the college tournament. Keep it as much as you possibly can if you are going to expand it.
Well, Coach, thanks for making the time. I hopefully didn't keep you off the golf course here on this Friday morning. Not sure what you got scheduled for the rest of the day, but hope you have a good weekend. Thanks for making the time to come on the show.
Thanks for having me. Anytime, it's always a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody, as always, for listening to Podcast on the Brink. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating over on Spotify, and we'll be back soon with another episode of Podcast on the Brink.